If there's anything that the 35 years of being alive has taught me, is that the most important thing in your life is your relationships and the quality of those relationships. And in this episode, I am going to be giving you some tips so that you can step into having even closer relationships in the year 2025. I love that. That's a really good one. Good for grounding. I'm recording already. Welcome to Openly Spoken, the podcast to help you show up, speak out, and be seen. On this podcast, we talk about self-love, relationships, sexuality, spirituality, and more. Hi, I am your host, Cilia Antonio, and I am a relationship and sexuality coach for ambitious women with a history of toxic relationships who desire to reconnect to their sensuality and who desire to feel worthy of receiving healthy love. I celebrate you for hitting play on today's episode. I hope that you find this very supportive and helpful. And if you could show some support to the podcast by hitting subscribe on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, wherever it is that you are listening to or watching this episode, it would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's dive into today's episode. So if this is your first time here, hi, my name is Cilia. I am a sexuality and relationship coach. I work with ambitious women with a history of toxic relationships who desire to feel worthy of receiving healthy love. And my journey with this definitely comes from my own experience of being an ambitious woman and just like having had a history myself of toxic relationships. And I think what is so difficult about being an ambitious woman with a history of toxic relationships, it's that it feels so safe to keep achieving and just keep getting lost in the sauce of ambition and keep like busying yourself. Because the alternative is slowing down and like really showing your heart and opening your heart, not only to someone else, but first and foremost, you have to do that to yourself. Like stopping and noticing how you're feeling, noticing what you want. It feels scary. It sometimes maybe even feels like a waste of time because something in your past taught you that. And I'm here to tell you that it is not true. Because once you stop and slow down and get out of that cycle of constantly checking things off of the list and being in your ambition and kind of just like doing more of, I was going to say more of the same, but it's like, it's hard to open your heart when you've had a history of toxic relationships because you have this belief of like, this is just how relationships are. And I'm here to tell you that it is not. Like the relationships that you really truly dream of really are possible. However, you are going to have to do some work to get there. And that is what I'm here for. If you want a one-on-one coach to help you with that, there will be links in the caption or show notes below to see my website and to see how you can work with me. And we're going to dive into like the most important pieces within this episode. So before I continue to ramble, let's dive right in. Also, Happy New Year. Like you deserve for 2025 to be your year of closer relationships, whether that is friendship, whether that is romantic relationship. And this episode is going to be for you whether or not you are single or already in a relationship, or even if you're in a long-term relationship. So the first thing that I have written down in my notes is to stop living for your partner. And if you are single, stop living in this state of constantly looking for a partner, if that is you. Stop living for external validation. And the way that you do that is by receiving validation from yourself. And that sounds very simple. It's not easy though. I wish we could all snap our fingers and do that, honestly. The world would be a completely different place. But the way that you give yourself the validation that you are seeking is by understanding that this desire for external validation really comes from childhood, as does all relationship things. All relationship kind of like struggles stem in childhood because that is our first relationship. Those are the first spaces with our caretakers where we learn relationships, where we learn how to communicate. We learn what's okay, what's not okay. We kind of like mold ourselves in a certain way based on the caretakers we had so that we can survive. And so for when it comes to women who have a history of toxic relationships, most likely your relationships with your parents were toxic. And I always like to say, and I've said this in previous episodes before, this is never about blaming your parents, because I truly don't believe that there are any parents out there who set to like mess up their kids. They're doing their best with what they know. So it's not about blaming them. And what's so beautiful about not going into the blame is it opens up more opportunity for you to change your behavior, which is really difficult. So the way you give yourself the validation that you did not receive from childhood is to do your own inner caretaker work. So if you've ever heard of the mother wound, if you've ever heard of the father wound, and you can always adjust those, if you were raised by two moms or two dads or whatever situation it was in, like you can always adjust that, but like really looking at the internalized versions of your caretakers that you are carrying. Usually your inner critic is an internalized voice that is one of your parents or one of your caretakers. So let's see, I thought I had a mother wound book on my desk. I have a ton of mother wound books. I actually have, I'll link in the caption or the show notes, I have this free mother wound healing guide. If you know already that you have a mother wound and you want to like dive into that, I won't get into what the mother wound is because I've talked about that in previous episodes already. And I really just want to keep this episode focused on like what you can do to have better relationships in 2025. So stop living for your partner, or stop living with all of the focus on like, oh, I need to find a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a them friend. Like, just focus on you. Focus on what makes you feel good, what makes you happy. Really, really lean into friendship, and the right person will come along. Really, I really, truly, genuinely believe that the right person will come along. Stop living for that external validation. Receive that validation for yourself. And the reason why that's so important is because if you are coming into a relationship wanting to receive external validation, you're coming into a relationship completely differently than you would if you took care of that yourself. You're coming into a relationship with this mentality of like, I'm half and you're my other half, and I'm only whole with you, rather than you're realizing that you're already whole and your partner or a potential partner would just be like a cherry on top of a life that you already love. And what's also really great about this first tip of like stop living for your partner or living for that relationship is you really get to know. I feel like it's a really good place to really get to know what you truly want and need in a partner, because you have your own life already like established, your own interests, your own routines, your own goals, your own ambitions, your own dreams. All of coming into a relationship with all of that stuff. I'm not saying that you like have to do that as a prerequisite, because you can definitely grow within a relationship, but coming into a relationship with all of that stuff, I think is really great material to work with, to you bring into the dating field, and to really have a kind of like, I guess, barometer or measuring stick to see if someone else is a match for you based on their own goals and stuff. I could probably say more things, but nothing's coming. So we'll leave it at that. Okay. So this next tip is going to be is really going to hit home for a lot of people who know that they were raised by emotionally immature parents, which, to be honest, is most of us. And again, it's not to blame our parents. I think what's been very helpful for me is to really look at the kind of like external culture that our parents and grandparents grew up in. Like an example that's coming to me is that phrase of like, boys don't cry. Like, how can we expect our fathers and grandfathers and great grandfathers to have emotional intelligence when they were fed the line, boys don't cry? And when you are raised by caretakers who don't have an adequate amount of emotional intelligence, I'm not sure how you would measure that, but like who don't have the capacity to really be there for your emotions, it affects the way they communicate. And when they don't communicate in a healthy way, when they're communicating in a way that feels emotionally violent or that is kind of like defensive or is making you wrong for feelings that you feel that you have no, like you're not feeling them on purpose, that's just what you're feeling, and now here you are getting made fun of or shamed or yelled at. I think that's something we can all relate to for the people that know that they have been raised by emotionally immature parents. There's a really good book called, I think it's just called Adult Children of Emotionally Mature. Yeah. It's called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, and it's by Lindsay Gibson. And I remember, I think I listened to the audiobook version of this. I remember just in the very first chapter feeling so seen by what was said. So if you're kind of on the fence about like not being so sure if you were raised by emotionally immature parents or not, I would definitely pick up that book. And if you already know, and maybe you've already read that book and you're looking for more resources, a really good podcast is called Adult Child. And it talks all about being an adult child of emotionally immature parents. So when your parent is emotionally immature and not able to, communicate in a healthy, non-violent way, then you don't learn core communication skills. You don't learn how to communicate properly. And that was one of my biggest pain points in relationships, like even all the way back to middle school and high school. Like it really leads to not being able to say no, not being able to set boundaries, anxiety about giving presentations in school, being like really shy in a way where it's like really scary to share your voice, which, probably could be a personality trait. But like when I look back at my own life, I realized that my shyness when I was younger was really just a manifestation of being conditioned to learn that it's not safe for me to express myself and to share my opinions. And so I invite you to like have an inquiry about that. Like ask yourself that question. Like if you identify as a shy person, like is that really your personality or is there some fear there? Like get curious about that. So learning better communication, learning how to, how would I articulate this? Big, 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 big. I said big a lot of times. A huge piece of communicating healthily and effectively is being able to be a really great listener and being able to hold space for what the person in front of you is saying instead of just playing this act like you're listening, like, and nodding along while you're holding on to a thought in your head of what you want to say next. That's one thing with better communication. And then, I guess I'll just continue giving a couple of communication tips. This podcast is called Openly Spoken, right? After you're listening to that person, mirroring back, meaning like repeating back some of the things they said, just to like make sure that you got it and also to help that person know that you really were listening. And then from there, going on to, maybe ask a question to go deeper into what they just said and like really just taking that time to honor the other person. And when you bring that into relationships, part of nonviolent communication is also really taking full responsibility for how you feel and realizing that when you feel angry because your partner did something, your partner is not making you feel angry. Like they are not making you feel angry. but what they did is making you feel angry. So it's very different to tell someone like, you're making me angry, versus when you do this, I feel angry. Because then it's like, okay, let's look at the like whatever you're putting after this. Let's look at that thing and see, like, can we do that differently? Like, can we talk about it? Is it a trigger from your childhood? Like, let's talk about this, rather than like when you tell somebody you're making me feel angry, and then it kind of just like adds fuel to a fire, and like a fight just like keeps getting bigger and like blowing up. And I guess that really like ties well into another tip that I didn't even write in my notes, but another tip for having closer relationships in 2025 is learning how to fight well, and like learning how to be able to disagree with your partner, even with your friends. But there's this therapist, I think his name is Dr. Harville Hendricks. He has a book called Getting the Love That You Want. And I remember he highlights in there that an important skill for a long-term, long-lasting relationship is that the couple knows how to fight well. And by fighting well, you're doing like an example of what I just said. When you do this, I feel this. Like, instead of attacking the person and saying like, you're making me do this, you're making me feel that, taking responsibility that like you are the one who is responsible for your own feelings and your own behaviors and your own actions. Even though your partner is doing something that can trigger those emotions, those feelings, and those behaviors, it doesn't mean that your partner is purposely being like, oh, I'm gonna piss her off. Like, let me do this thing because it's gonna make her angry. I mean, in some cases, you could be in that situation. And if you are, please dump the person. Please get out of that situation. But most of the time, it's like your partner is just being them. They're just existing, and you know, they could also be communicating in a way where they need to learn nonviolent communication. I'm not sure if any of this is making sense today. Let's take a breath together and a sip of coffee. Maybe I've had too much coffee today. Proceeds to still drink more coffee. So what have we got so far? We've got stop living for your partner, learn better communication skills, and learn to fight well. So another good resource for better communication skills is a book. There's a book called Nonviolent Communication. There's also an organization called Toastmasters that really helps you communicate effectively. I also truly think, you know, as someone who has gone down the path of sacred sexuality work, like in my own personal work, and who has coached dozens of women so far on sacred sexuality practices. And what I mean when I say sacred sexuality is just kind of like releasing shame around sexuality and reclaiming sexuality as something that is sacred. I think doing that is also a good place to lean into if you want to learn better communication, because you come home to your body, you come home to what is a no for you. And when you come home to what is a no for you, your yes reveals itself to you, and you know what you desire, you know what you like you know yourself better from really reclaiming this part of yourself that has been just shamed for generations. And obviously that learning better communication skills will bleed into fighting better. And I think a good place to start with the piece of sacred sexuality and how that helps you communicate better is a very simple practice that I'm actually like going to do it along with you. I don't think I normally do this in episodes, but this is something I do with my one-on-one clients as well. So if you are driving, you can go ahead and fast forward or just listen along and don't follow along. I mean, don't like close your eyes or anything, but if you are not driving, first, I want to ask if you could position yourself so that your feet are flat on the ground, so that you have some sense of grounding. And then from there, take a notice take a second to notice that contact with your feet on the ground. And then notice the contact of your hips and your legs with whatever surface you are sitting on. And then very gently just fluttering your eyes closed and noticing those points where your body is touching the surface that you are sitting on, from the bottoms of your feet to the bottoms of your legs, your hips. Maybe you even feel your chair on your back if you are sitting in a chair with a back. And then from here, taking a deep breath in. And exhale as you exhale from the mouth and really just let out some sound. And one way this already helps you with better communication is a lot of times I've noticed over my decade plus of guiding people through breathwork, because I was a yoga and meditation teacher before I became a relationship coach. So guiding people with deep breaths and letting out sound as they exhale, I really notice how the majority of people will not make that exhale. They won't make a sound. Sometimes a handful of people will make the sound after I then demonstrate it, after I'm willing to be the weird one to just be in a class, whether I'm the instructor or whether I am a student in someone else's yoga, meditation, or mindfulness class. So that's the first way. And if you opened your eyes while I said that, just taking a moment to settle back in. And the practice I want to invite you into is called a felt sense practice. And the felt sense, what it really is the sensations that you feel in your body from moment to moment. And in a felt sense practice, you are noticing where in your body you feel a sensation. And then you are saying out loud what that sensation is and the location of that sensation. So if you feel like you have the capacity to do that, you will. And I will demonstrate first to give you some examples. So I feel in my pelvis and hips this really heavy, anchored type of feeling. I feel a tingly excitement in my fingertips. I feel a tension in between my eyebrows, and as I bring my awareness to that and speak it out loud, I feel that tension melt a little bit. I definitely feel a jittery feeling in my eyes. It's like there's all this excitement and ideas rolling around in my eyes, if that makes sense. It's a weird visual, but that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling a little tightness at the very top of my shoulders. My spine feels fluid and soft and strong. And then just overall, I normally don't do this in the felt sense, but overall, I just feel this sense of peace and calm in bringing my attention inward. So now I invite you, if you have the capacity, to do that same practice. I'll also guide this a little bit. So if you want to do this in silence, you can pause the episode. But something that makes this practice a little bit easier, especially for someone who's never done this before, is being directed to certain areas and then noticing rather than like letting it be a free-for-all. So I'll invite you to notice, what do you feel in your feet? And speaking that out loud, very important to speak it out loud because we're connecting the feeling centers of the brain with the language centers of the brain. This is why this is a great practice for learning better communication. So what are you feeling in your feet? What about your lower legs? What do you feel here? And what sensations are present in your upper legs and maybe even your knees? What sensations are present in your hips, your pelvis, lower body? Sensations are present in your lower belly? What sensations do you feel in the entirety of your torso? What's popping up? What's popping out? What sensations do you feel in your arms? What sensations do you feel in your hands? And what about your chest, your neck, the throat? What sensations are present here? And what about the head? What sensations do you feel maybe in your jaw, your lips, your nose, cheeks, eyes, eyebrows, scalp? And then just noticing overall, what does it feel like to bring your awareness inward and to notice what your body is feeling, what sensations your body is experiencing? What does it feel like to bring your attention to that? And then taking a deep breath, fluttering your eyes open, looking around your space, maybe even standing up if that's accessible to you, and shaking out your body if that sounds like something you want to do. And this brings me to my next tip for closer relationships in 2025 is to make more room for mindfulness practices. And mindfulness practices really do work their magic when you come to them again and again. Doing a 2-hour long practice once a week or once a month is not going to give you more transformation than a 5-minute practice done every day. And I think in our modern society that like really likes to, depending on your algorithms, a lot of us can, we're all ambitious women here. We probably have that. We probably all see this in our algorithm where productivity is really put on a pedestal and we feel like we don't have time to stop and to do a 5-minute thing. And it also feels like, oh, it's just 5 minutes. Like, what is that going to do? I'd rather just like do it for 2 hours and feel good about myself that I like accomplished this 2-hour thing. That's not how mindfulness works. That's not how our body and our nervous system works. We need those moments where we can truly be fully present for those 5 minutes. And we need that to happen regularly, because being a human is full of ups and downs. It's full of like feeling unregulated and then dipping down and feeling like just low. And it's, this constant, like you're at equilibrium, but then you go up and then you're back at it. Like that's normal. It's normal. It's normal. It's normal. And I'm recording this in December, but this is coming out on New Year's Day. So we're still in the midst of winter. I think it's important to touch on, like, it's normal to, unless you live in Australia, because it's basically like summer there, or New Zealand, but it's normal to feel a little bit lower in the wintertime. Something that I've recently found, this feels kind of off topic, but something that I recently found that really helps me feel good when I'm in those moments, because I feel those winter blues too. I feel them every year, to be honest. One of my favorite things to watch when I just like need a reminder that it's okay to feel those low points is literally any stand-up comedy special by Tom Papa. Because all the ones that I've seen so far, I'm not sure if I've seen all of them. I've seen at least 2, maybe 3. And what the ones that I've seen have in common is his set always goes to talking about how it's normal to feel low. Like it's normal to feel sad. It's normal to feel like your life isn't going anywhere. Like that's a part of being human. And I really love how he takes a moment to normalize that. And also, like, not only is it stand-up comedy, which is my comfort type of content anyways, which helps because you're laughing, but also just him like addressing that's okay really helps me. So that's just a kind of side note. And I would say that I would link it in the show notes, but I feel like I've said that a lot of links already that I've linked in the show notes. So you can just, he has an easy name to remember and to spell. Tom Papa. He's a stand-up comedian. Okay, so let's look back at my notes. Okay, we were on the topic of mindfulness. I think I said everything I needed to say. Mindfulness is also, I think mindfulness can get a bad rap because people who don't have experience with mindfulness will think of mindfulness in one specific way, and they'll think of it as like only sitting still, closing your eyes, and going like that. That's the only way. But I assure you it's not. As a trained and experienced yoga meditation teacher, I know mindfulness, and mindfulness can even be dancing. You do not have to sit still and close your eyes and be silent and just sit in silence. Like that actually for some people can be very triggering and traumatizing depending on the person. Like some people need to work their way up to that. So if you are one of those people that is like, mindfulness ain't for me, I've tried it out before, I just really want to encourage you that there is a mindfulness method out there for you that works. Even like those mindful coloring books, like that's mindful. That's a mindful exercise. There's so many. Okay, I don't want to get off topic. Okay, what is another tip I want to give for you to have closer relationships in 2025? Give yourself a digital detox so that you can have closer relationships in 2025. Because I truly think that the internet has gone in this direction where it is such a social experience that we are socializing more and more just on those platforms. And an important piece that is missing from that social experience is that there is not that face-to-face person there. And just from a level of psychology and biology, like motor, what is it called? Mirror neurons in the brain. Like there's so many aspects of it that we are missing from socializing when we are doing all our socializing through a screen, because we're technically not even really socializing because we're just reading text and responding to text. Like that wasn't a thing in grandpa's time. That is not, we are social creatures, and like we did not evolve as social creatures to just throw sentences back and forth to each other. or like voice notes, or like it's not deep enough. It's not superficial enough. It's whatever the opposite of superficial is, because it is superficial. It's like totally superficial. It doesn't have the depth. And also on the other side, without digital detox, all these apps that we use these days are literally designed to be addictive. Like they're like the modern day cigarettes of our time. Like I truly do believe that decades from now we're going to have more research. I mean, I think the research is already coming out now about how harmful social media is, and it's going to be like cigarettes, how like we used to think that cigarettes were healthy for us. We completely just were completely naive to how cigarettes were actually very bad for us. And then later on, we learned cigarettes cause cancer and all this stuff. I think the same thing is going to happen with social media. We're going to notice how it causes behavioral problems, especially being in a time where people are born with access to social media at younger and younger and younger ages. Like that is very terrifying. So there's that. And when you become addicted to social media, which in my opinion will inevitably happen if you are on it without any sort of digital detox or intentional boundaries, because that's just how the apps were created. They know how our psychology works, and they really purposely did create these apps so that we would be addicted to them, because that's how those apps make their money. When that happens, it is so difficult for us to be present in our relationships. Then we become that friend who, have you ever had this? I've had this experience with at least two people that I know, where you are talking to a friend and they are like, and they're like scrolling, and you're like, can you put your phone down? You become that person that just can't be present because the phone is an addiction. And that's just a friendship example. In relationship example, I hear so many times, and I've even gone through this, where in multiple of my relationships, where there's so much resentment that builds up when one or more, even more of the partners are scrolling all the time. And if they're both scrolling, they probably don't notice that their relationship is slowly deteriorating because you're not taking the time to nourish that relationship. Your relationship is not a cactus. It needs watering. Well, I was going to say it needs sunlight. Cactuses need a lot of sunlight, but it needs watering. It needs attention. It needs care. And if you are addicted to scrolling and you are just scrolling, your partner is going to get resentful. If you're both scrolling, you're both not going to notice that the relationship is slowly deteriorating around you. So digital detox, for sure. Ditch your phone on the weekends if you can. I mean, I know that's hard to say for the parents in the room, but is there one day a week where you maybe have your kids with you, or your partner has your kids, or like your mom or someone else can have the kids? Is there one day a week where you can completely not be on your phone and just like let everybody know, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I don't want to be on the phone. I want to take a little break. Can you do that? And you can. There are huge communities. There are even like religious communities that do this. I'm thinking of people who practice Shabbat and who are not on their phones on Friday nights all the way till Saturday night. Okay, let's see. To have closer relationships. Okay, another thing I wrote down. I wrote it for people who are in relationships. I wrote down micro connections. And what I mean by micro connections, if you are in a relationship and you're both very busy and you haven't really been able to make the space or time for date nights, and you feel disconnected from your partner and you want to work on having a closer connection, start with these micro connections. And a micro connection is a devotion to a regular, whether it's daily, whether it's every other day. I would say at least every other day, where there's this little moment that you both set as like, this is our time together. And what I mean by little moments, having coffee together in the morning. For me, that's one that I try to lean into, which is hard because my husband wakes up at like 4 a.m. But when I do wake up early with him and just at least drink coffee with him, like, it is the best. It's the best. It's so worth it. Those little Those little things I think are the most potent when it's something you do in the morning and at night. And if you can only do one, at least do the morning one. Because then when you go to sleep, you kind of like have that to look forward to. And like when you're starting your day like that, it kind of sets you up to just feel loved for the rest of the day. So the micro connections. So that can look like having coffee in the morning. It can look like at the end of the day, asking your partner, like, what was your favorite moment of today? Or what's something you're grateful for that's specific to this day? It can even be like taking some time to cuddle. That's one of our favorites. So like, it doesn't have to be this hard, complicated thing. It's just this little activity that you both are committed to really honoring and really prioritizing. Like, we're going to spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes every morning or every other morning having our coffee together, like taking that time to really connect before the busy day takes us away. And I think that's even more important for parents, because having a child, I'm sure, speaking as someone who is child free, having a child takes away all of your free time. And I'm sure it feels like there's no more time to connect with your partner. However, you and your partner, if you guys are solid and you are good with each other, your child is going to feel that, and it's only going to benefit them. And that, although I am child free, that is based on the research. I love nerding out about psychology, social psychology, developmental psychology, early childhood development, all those things. One of my favorite topics to nerd out on. Okay, a couple more things down, but I feel like we kind of address these indirectly in the other tips. So I'll just circling it back to that first tip I gave of stop living for your partner. And that tip so here's my last tip: to have closer relationships in 2025. Really take the time to connect with what is important to you. What are your goals? What are your true desires? And really honoring those things and having grace with yourself and not rushing to achieve those desires, especially if you are in a chapter of your life where you're raising babies and time is just very scarce. Like, really just have grace for yourself that as humans, we want a lot of things. And as humans living in the modern world, that's all about, quick fixes. All the things that we wanted them yesterday. But can you pause? Can you go back to that, like the moment of like closing your eyes and leaning into mindfulness? If there's one thing you can take away from my highly caffeinated blabbering today, it is to lean into mindfulness. If there's one thing you want to do to have closer relationships, lean into mindfulness. And mindfulness, if you are someone even who is seasoned in mindfulness, there's always a way to deepen. Like, you can contemplate on certain things. And I'm really feeling called to share like one of the most important things to contemplate on, which I have come back to I've been guesting on other people's podcasts finally. That's been a little comfort stretch for me. And a lot of the episodes, I kind of always relate it back to this one concept that I think is very profound to sit with and contemplate. And I do think it's something that will help you have better relationships. And it's because this one simple thing will help you have more confidence. And having more confidence leads to being able to set better boundaries. It leads to being able to really articulate and communicate your needs. And all of those things are going to help you have closer relationships. This practice is also going to help you figure out what's important to you. And what this one simple thing, simple but hard, is to accept the fact that you're going to die one day. We just got dark. Accepting the fact that you are going to die one day and bringing this into mindfulness is meditating on this truth. Like, really just like sitting and contemplating that you will die and like noticing all the feelings of resistance that come up, noticing all the fear that comes up. Allow yourself to feel it, allow yourself to express it. Make room to feel those feelings and digest those feelings, because no matter what, no matter your resistance, guess what? You're still going to die one day. And when you make the room to feel those feelings and digest what comes up, you start to cultivate more acceptance for the fact that you will one day die. And when you can truly and radically accept the fact that you will one day die, suddenly your vision of your future, like what you want life to be at the end, becomes very clear to you. It becomes very clear to you. And this is why this concept of contemplating your death, it is brought up in a lot of self-development books, but it's like in between the lines. One example is Stephen Covey's Highly Effective Habits. What is it called? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The very first habit in there is begin with the end in mind. That's accepting that you will one day die. And then there's another book, I forget what it's called, but it's also this book for like business owners, and they tell you to imagine your funeral and write down your eulogy. Again, accepting that you will die. And that's not to say that like when you create your vision of like what you want to do, it's not to say that you can't change your mind, because you have that freedom to change your mind. However, I'm trying to tie this back to our topic of deeper relationships, closer relationships in 2025. When we keep pretending like we are not ever going to die, I think we put ourselves in a position to settle in relationships because we think like time is endless. We put ourselves in a position of not speaking up in relationships because when you can accept that you will one day die and you digest all of the fear and resistance that comes up from that, nothing can scare you, because death is the ultimate like fear. And if you're not afraid of that anymore, why would you be afraid of being like, hey, I don't like it when you say whatever it is? Or why would you be afraid of asking for a raise or asking for that promotion? Or why would you be afraid of doing whatever it is that you say that you want, but you don't have it because you're afraid of it? And if you look at any fear that you have and you really break it down and sit with it and see like, what's underneath that? Okay, what's underneath that? Okay, what's underneath that? You are eventually going to land on fear of death. That's what that's what it all leads to, because it's just a part of our biology. Like, we are creatures that are expertly designed for survival. And I feel like we got so deep right now. We got so dark, but I hope that this episode really genuinely helps you. Like, I want your 2025 to be the year where you have deeper relationships, where you have the friendships of your dreams, where you have the romance of your dreams. And if deeper relationships is something that you want, if you are desiring a coach to support you in having deeper relationships in 2025, and you want that one-on-one support, and you are an ambitious woman with a history of toxic relationships, we might be a fit to work together. So there's going to be a link in the show notes for my website. You can find out more about my work there. Thank you so much for listening. And if you are watching on YouTube, please do comment below. What was your favorite tip? I know I rambled a lot, but what was your favorite tip? Like, or what is the tip that you're working on? What was your aha moment? I know those were a lot of questions. The caffeine is really talking today. All right. Bye, everybody.